2 years ago, the Master of Communication and Digital Media program hosted TEDx Seattle at the Pacific Science Center, and Ben was actually one of our highlighted and awesome speakers. And at that event, we recognized that we were able to bring together people who don't normally come under the same roof in Seattle. Seattle is a really creative, productive place, but too many people are sort of happy to stay in their silos and don't come together. And we saw those people actually came together at that event. So we decided to create this initiative called 4 Peaks to really push the bridging of those silos, or the peaks of innovation, entrepreneurship, community, and entertainment in a way that we could actually start sort of recreating the narrative of this region, of engaging people, creating a creative leadership network. People want to go to TED because they think they're getting into the network and it's a very exclusive club. We want to do something like that, but a lot more open. Plus, we want to, as we're a degree program, we wanted to give other opportunities for you to be lifelong learners and not necessarily pursue a degree. So that was what 4 Peaks was all about. And we're ultimately about disruption. That's what the Master of Communication and Digital Media looks at, with technology disrupting industries, communication, but also, as we're going to find out starting tonight, our own world, which is higher education. And we think this is a very important conversation for us to have now. It was indeed John Cook who inspired me to look at this a few months ago when he started really being quite critical of our higher education infrastructure in our region, and thinking that we needed to bring somebody in from the outside to really provide what we need. So we think that we have this opportunity to have this conversation, especially since the University of Washington came to us just about a month ago and said, Husky Fest, April 19th, we want to make your television show 4 Peaks the showcase of Husky Fest. And we thought, oh, well, they're going to put all that marketing muscle behind us. We have an opportunity to actually cover this event, this topic, in a much bigger way. So there will be a TV show on April 19th in the middle of Red Square that you're all invited to. There's 800 places, and it's a live show. But before we get to that show, we want to have a very public conversation about this subject. And it begins tonight. It continues next week with a private dinner that we're having with 12 experts on the subject, just to get a sense of what they think is the challenge with higher education. And even though it is a closed-door event, we'll be sharing a lot of that information with everybody as that happens. And then we have the TV show on the 19th. And then on the 25th, we bring it all together with a big idea that our students have been covering this from the beginning. You see some of the ideas that we're going to get you to share on the walls. And we hope to have one really great, innovative idea by the end of this month that we can commit to actually executing upon, that we'll be presenting to the head of X Prize, Peter Diamandis, who's also CEO of Singularity University in California, on the 25th, and that'll be at Jet City Improv. So this is a massive thing that we're doing. Our students have been driving a lot of it, and we're really proud of the conversation that we're beginning to open on this because we think it's an important one. So now, I'm going to shut up, and I'm going to welcome John Cook from GeekWire, who I dearly love, and whose site I look at maybe 5 or 6 times a day as the nerve center for our world in the Pacific Northwest, who's co-founder of GeekWire. And our good friend Ben Ha, who's CEO of Cheezburger Inc., and just an awesome, innovative thinker in so many ways. And we knew that neither John nor Ben are necessarily steeped in higher education on a 100% basis every moment of their lives. But this is what we want to do. We don't want to ask talking heads in leadership positions in higher education to tackle this first. We want provocateurs and people who think creatively and innovatively and think about what our region needs to tackle that. So this is why we asked Ben and John, who are known commodities in our world, to kick this off for us. So thank you guys for joining us. So I'm going to pass it off to John. And again, John, the premise to this comes from you, from your high criticism of our area. So I'm going to ask you, why did you think that the University of Washington is not capable enough to serve our community? So here you go.
You're going to put me on the hot seat right off the bat.
Yeah, John, how is that?
Are you going to interview me
yes,
now?
Yes, I am. We're going to turn the tables for a little bit.
We can just mix that up. No, we can probably get into some of those thoughts later in the discussion. What Hansen is alluding to is I wrote a column talking about how Stanford University should come and set up a branch campus in Seattle to cater to all the geeks here, and thought it was a very provocative column. It was more done just to raise an issue than to really think that we could get Stanford up here. But I do want to interview you, Ben, and I've interviewed you a number of times over the years, going back from the early days of when you started Cheezburger, and we've had a number of conversations on a variety of topics, but this is one I don't think we've ever talked about, is education. And so I'm really excited to dig into some of the issues here tonight, and but first off, I have a real burning question about education, and that is, how did your own educational background prepare you to be a reality TV star?
So I'll answer that question by talking about my experience in journalism school. So I went to Northwestern University in Chicago, Illinois. And I went there because I was enamored with journalism as a high school student, and I wanted to understand the world, and that was like the lens through in which journalism can give you a lot of perspective and lets you meet a lot of people and do things like that. And when I graduated, it was 1999, which was like the boom days of like .com, and newspapers were like buying each other for like billions of dollars, and like it was going to be an amazing time, and we would never suffer through a recession ever again.
You were going to be the next great newspaper entrepreneur.
You know, I actually wasn't thinking too much about entrepreneurship when I went there. I was actually thinking more about journalism and the purity of journalism and like the pursuit of the truth and all that stuff that you know, people kind of brainwash you when you're in J school. But that's what drew me there. When I left school, it was a very different world, and I had learned a lot, but not from the ways you'd expect from the classroom.
How did you learn? And I mean, did you get anything out of that experience that you've now applied to running a entrepreneurial venture?
Yeah, you know, not a Husky, so apologize, but like, you know, Northwestern was a fantastic school. It was an incredibly intellectual, incredibly smart. Availability was into an amazing number of people who are tops in their field that I never took advantage of. Right? That was the irony. It was like when you're an undergrad, you have no idea that the guy who's like teaching in the course next to you, or when you have free time, you can walk into a professor's office who's the world's greatest at this thing. And you have no clue. And I'm like, I didn't understand why, like when I was in like the freshman orientation week, they're like, by the way, there are people here who know more about molecular biology than anyone else on this planet. And you should really go talk to them because you'll learn something, and that something could change your life. No one told me that. So what did I do? I drank beer, I like flunked a class, I worked at the college newspaper, which was a daily, so it was like I lived there. But even despite the failures of educating you about the education system, I walked away amazingly humbled by the caliber of the students around me. So I went to a public high school in California, which was unfortunately not very good. And when I went to Northwestern, I remember taking an introduction to existentialism class. So it's kind of heady, and I was like, you know, when you're a freshman, you're like, oh, philosophy, you know, that'll do me well in life. So, you know, you take one of these classes, and then you read these books, and you can't understand them, and like you turn to your dorm mates and like, have you heard of this guy? His last name is spelled like, I can't pronounce, Goethe, Goethe? And they're like, oh yeah, Goethe. Yeah, we've read him in high school. Where did you go to high school? Exeter? I'm like, fuck. You know, sorry. And so you run into these situations where you're like completely undermatched. And then you learn that if you're motivated, that you can learn better and learn more, but you have to work really hard at it.
So would you go back? If you were going back to college, what would you do?
Like as a high schooler? Like if I relived my life?
Yeah, would you, in this day and age, because you know there's this whole movement right now amongst a lot of folks, and even in the venture capital and startup community that I cover, there are folks out there that are encouraging people to kind of drop out of high school and just go do the entrepreneurial thing. So I'm going to rewind the clock back to 1995 when I went into college.
I would probably make the same decision to go. I might opt to go to Stanford versus Northwestern because it's a hell of a lot warmer. It's a real factor, and I probably would have dropped out. I think I actually regret not dropping out, to be honest.
You regret not dropping out of Northwestern, or?
I regret not dropping out of Northwestern.
Why is that?
Because the most exciting stuff that was happening in the world at the time was not happening in education. Like going to college was not the most exciting thing that I could have learned. Like it was very valuable, but I think trying my hand at building the early part of the internet would have been amazing in my life, and maybe I would have had a discipline to go back to school and finish my degree. It didn't work, but I think it's a chance that was worth taking.
It seems almost more so now, wouldn't you agree?
That people should drop out of school?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's almost more opportunity, there's more hands-on learning you can get out in the real world, and there are programs that are set up like a TechStars or General Assembly,
I think
you can learn to program or do a
Well, I think the reason you and I aren't even on stage today when talking about this is the fact that higher education for the first time is actually facing a competitive threat from a non-higher educational source. Right? And that's like the eye-opening thing that you hear about educators talking today. No one used to argue the relevance of formal education until very, very recently. And it's because people have the opportunity to actually gain practical experience. But I want to dispel this myth here, which is higher education as a monolithic thing. People who go to college and have enough drive to say, I got in here, it was really hard, and I'm going to risk things and actually drop out and start my own business, are not the types of people that higher education was actually set up for. I know that there's this elitist kind of feeling to, four-year university and things like that, but that's not why higher education exists. At least, I don't think it should exist for that. There are people in the world who will do well practically no matter what. They don't need college. And if they have it, it's a great added value. There are people who will suffer through life and never have the opportunities, and higher education has no meaning to them because it's not even accessible. Those are the people that we're leaving behind, unfortunately. And then there's the middle group who need a little bit more structure, a little bit more formality. They need to be, they don't have quite the drive and the hunger that the most hungry people have. And that's where I think higher education is adding the most value, because otherwise, if they didn't become a part of a four-year program, but they may not have pursued a four-year stint in learning beyond high school. It's the middle of the curve that I think higher education benefits the most, and the people who may have the smarts and may have the drive, but are not able to get into college because it's shut out for one reason or another, are the ones whose lives we are completely wasting. Because with access to higher education, they could be so much better at contributing to the society and economy, and we don't do that.
So from the entrepreneurial perspective, do you think entrepreneurs are well served going through that sort of structured environment, or are they better off without formal education and training? I mean, we're talking about a very small segment, I admit, of the population. It might be 1% of those people, but it's an important group. I mean, you're part of that group, I would say.
I don't think entrepreneurs, well, it's like we talk about entrepreneurs like they're a social class or like a caste of people, right? We're not. Different times in your life, you will have more of a calling to be an entrepreneur, and sometimes you won't. I don't know that you can ever learn how to be an entrepreneur in class. I think what schools do is they're great at connecting you with other people of the same caliber or like-mindedness or have the same outlook, and giving you kind of the social glue that says, oh, we went to the same school, even though we don't know each other, maybe there's something in common and we can trust one another. It engenders trust and connectivity. And that has a ton of value. So when I actually folded my first company in 2001, my friends were telling me, you should really go apply to Kellogg, the graduate school at Northwestern. And they're like, you'll probably get in. I'm like, what's the value of that? Because I need to kind of make a living because I can't pay for my bills right now. And they said, the first thing they said was, dude, you'll be so well connected. It wasn't like, man, there's a great education. And for all intents and purposes, Kellogg's a great graduate school. And that's not the first thing they mentioned. They're like, you'll be so well connected, you'll do well in life. And I think that's still very, very true. When the world is amplifying and exploding the number of connections people can have to one another, common experiences stand out. The ones that you can build because you actually went through something with someone, like when you actually went to the same class or went through the same trials and tribulations with somebody, really stand out as the one that you can trust.
So for your employees, I mean, you're at how many folks now? 100 employees?
Almost 100, yeah.
About 100 employees. So where did your best employees come from? Are they self-trained? Did they drop out of college? Did they go to college? Do they have advanced degrees?
I have no idea where they went to school. I'm pretty sure that we do not have a single MBA in our company, and I'm not sure if that's on purpose or not. But I don't think I've ever looked at anybody's GPA. I certainly don't want to look at mine. So, yeah, we don't look at their education. We look at what they did, right? It's like when you were in school, did you do something incredible? When you graduated, did you do something that was not totally self-serving? If you just are graduating from school and you don't really have a lot of experience in your resume, and you submit your resume to a company, there are hundreds of people exactly like you from practically the same school applying for that same job. So how are you going to stand out? I was talking with a young lady who's an undergrad, and she asked me for career advice. And I said, my best career advice is to delay your career and do something selfless and amazing for a year that you would probably hate to do. Because that's going to make you, like, when I see that in the resume, I'm going to look at it. And I'm probably going to call you for an interview because you're different, right? Because ironically, as access to higher education becomes better, we're creating more of the same. And I'm looking for something a little different.
Yeah. So before we started the talk, you were talking about recruiting, and now you're getting to a point where you're becoming a much bigger company with about 100 employees, and you were talking about some of the challenges in getting high quality talent into the company. So you do need folks that are highly educated in certain things. Are you able to find that here? Are you getting what you need?
Oh, we are absolutely finding that here. We're absolutely finding amazingly talented people in Seattle. And it's funny, I was telling Hanson that we interviewed somebody who was very good from the MCDM program just today. So there's absolutely an amazing talent of people, and what's lovely is that this place is drawing talent from the entire Northwest. So that's a competitive advantage that Seattle has, that UW has, which is that you're drawing talent from this region, from Idaho, from Oregon, from other places, but that's not good enough. If you want to be a world-class city, and I would argue that Seattle is on the fringes of becoming a real world-class city, where there's tons of multicultural things, and we're not just colloquial about our region. You need a university. You need actually more than one university that is world-class. And I think UW definitely, if they're not already there, can be there. The amount of research dollars that go into UW, the amount of research people that show up from all over the world, the Bill Gates Foundation is going to draw a tremendous amount of multicultural talent from all over the world into the city, and we have to take advantage of that if we really want the word Seattle to be spoken in the same sentence as San Francisco, and it's not today. It's going to take decades, but that requires a foresight from the people who run the city and people who run the state to say, we're not going to listen to the 1,000 different voices that want us to be driven in 1,000 different directions. We're actually going to put a stake in the sand and say, we're going to become a world-class city, and that means starting with education. Because you have to start there. Because even if I come to, even if I drop out of school, at least I came here. Right? At least I'm here in Seattle. And that's what brought me to Chicago. I lived in Sacramento. And I could have gone to Stanford. I could have gone to Chicago. I didn't consider the Northwest. I didn't consider any other places because for me and the education that I was pursuing, there's only a couple places I could go.
Great. We're going to open it up for questions right now. So if anyone has something, just we're a small enough room here. I think we can just yell it out. And Frank.
Ben, what's the role of K-12 in providing graduates to feed into higher education or informal learning situations?
Thank you, Frank. The question is, what's the role of K through 12? Is there a soapbox here? Because I'm going to stand on it for a little bit. I think it is absolutely terrible that this state is one of the most regressive tax states in the country. We are shooting ourselves in the foot for the next 50 years by not funding K through 12. Where do you think college kids come from, right? So I think the question you answered is, thank you so much for doing that, because I think you and I probably agree about this. We are it's frustrating. It's really frustrating.
Well, is there anything we can do? I mean, what is the solution in your mind?
We need to fund our schools. We need to fund our not private schools, public schools with all of our money, because I don't have kids, but I am more than happy to make sure that we have a better education system, because if I plan on being here and if I plan on my family being here for a long time, if we don't fund our K through 12, we're not going to have great college kids, and we're just going to have to rely on importing people to go to our schools, taking up our state slots. That's not right. We need to raise the ability for us to fund our children's future.
Great, right up front.
Then as a business owner, would you support an income tax to fund it?
On businesses?
Yeah, or just an income tax on individuals.
Yes, I voted for the income tax I voted for state income tax for that precise reason.
So there was an initiative 1098, which was going to be a tax on essentially the wealthiest Washingtonians, and it got just hammered. And it was a very polarizing issue in the tech community. It was very split. but it went down in flames. I mean, it was, what,
Started out popular.
Yeah.
It did. It just got decimated. There was a decision that made there that it just didn't want to go forward with that. But
I just had an observation and also a question, and that is that if you talk about higher education, there are many, many, many models you can choose to talk about. The University of Washington is one model. Right down the road, 60 miles away, is an entirely different model that's all about experience and all about getting people out in workplaces, getting people working for you on an internship. And maybe what we really should be talking about is how to change the old model so that it meets the new world in a better way. And look at the places that are already doing that successfully. So what do you think of that idea?
well, I think it's a great idea. It's not only change the old model, but invent new models. Why do we have to try to? And I think that's part of what we've been seeing in some of what we were talking about earlier in terms of this new class of organizations that are kind of challenging higher education, the Techstars of the world and General Assembly and a lot of the maker movement, these hacker workspaces. I mean, there are a lot of places where you can go to learn and get educated on things that potentially are actually more practical than what you would learn at a traditional higher educational institution. And they're just not as much in the mainstream. They're not as supported as much. And I don't know how you get those things to become more formalized and how they.
So part of the problem is that we don't. A lot of employers will reject resumes if they don't have a bachelor's degree, and it's like an easy way to screen out candidates that they don't think have a high likelihood of passing. And the reason we do that is because of the oversupply of resumes into the system. But what I wish there was like a signal, like being admitted to a 4-year educational program is like passing the bar as a lawyer. You might not be a good one, but at least you passed the bar, right? So I kind of want the same thing for people who didn't go to college. Like, I wish there was like a test, or I wish there was something that they could put on their resume. It's like, yeah, I didn't have a 4-year degree, I never got into college, but I passed this test, and it says I'm actually not an idiot. Like, I wish there was that, because then employers...
Not appearing on Failblog endlessly.
Well, they could. I mean, there's a lot of college-educated people who appear in Failblog, I'm sure. But that's what I mean. Like, there's part of the reason why people don't pursue non-traditional education is that there's a stigma associated with not having gone to a four-year college. And I wish we could find a way to kind of remove that from the system, because then you start to open up the floodgates.
So Ben, to that question, do you think there is a way to fix or bring the old model into more of the new era here that would help your firm? Or
Yeah. Actually, I think you mentioned Techstars, and I think that's a really great example. If I ran into somebody who has a high school degree but got into a Techstars or Y Combinator or one of the better accelerator programs, and they did that, I would actually consider that pretty equivalent. I might actually consider that person more qualified, because I'm really looking for that social signal at the applicant level that says, hey, I've actually done something pretty amazing and you should really consider me even though I don't have a 4-year degree. So that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for. And I think specifically industries are actually getting these signals. Yeah.
Maybe one more question? Okay, go right up front.
You said that you wish that you had, in retrospect, maybe dropped out of college. So I'm curious, you're a pretty critical thinker, and I like to believe, as a former instructor at a university, that you learned critical thinking in the Northwest program. Were you born with critical thinking? Do you think
I think you're giving me way too much credit. So she's making the assumption that because I wanted to drop out of school that I had critical thinking skills. Okay.
If you had dropped out, would you
would I have learned, had I dropped out, would have gotten the same critical thinking skills? I don't think that I would have. I don't think I learned my critical thinking at college, unfortunately. I actually think that the reverse happened, which was when I went to journalism school, they told me not to think about journalism because this is the way things are. And I think that's terrible. It took a couple of years for me to unwind that. I think that was a bit of a disservice. The places in which I was actually really in college that taught me how to think critically were classes that you consider are completely irrelevant to careers, like philosophy or English or Russian literature, where you actually have to put yourself in the shoes of somebody else. And that's where I probably learned mine, not from the journalism school that I went to. So, yeah.
Who's your favorite teacher and why?
Who was my favorite teacher? I was born in Korea and I moved to Hong Kong when I was 11 years old. There was a teacher at a transitionary English school who taught me English. And she was this jolly British woman. She was very kind to someone who couldn't speak the language.
My favorite teacher. I saw this up on the wall earlier, and I was going to write something down, but I was struggling to do it. I would probably be a history teacher I had in high school. I was a history major in college, and he was just kind of a loudmouth malcontent and didn't fit in well with the rest of the teachers, and so yeah, I guess it maybe resonated with me to some degree, but yes. So John Albright. Oh, one more.
Same guy.
So there's a lot of, I run a youth program in Seattle, and there's a lot of untapped creative genius in communities that are disenfranchised and detached. What do you think about, you named some programs like Techstars where people are just learning among themselves, giving access to those type of tools just in communities that are disadvantaged and are not connected at that level and probably don't connect to the university level?
So the reason Techstars exists because it takes advantage of a tiny group of people who are working in a field with potential for incredible return. So Techstars isn't a nonprofit. It is a for-profit institution driven by the prospect of return on investment. The problem with working with creative people in a disadvantaged community is that the prospect for ROI, from a monetary ROI, is not there. And so the model has to be changed. And so what Techstars does that's really fantastic is that it is incredibly selective. It is probably harder to get into Techstars than it is to get into Harvard. Okay? And then not only do they have that, they pair them up with mentors from the startup community because we have a vested interest both from recruiting, from learning from them, but also from investing for financial return to that group of people. So you have to find a way to have a program that has similar investment and return, and maybe it's social return, maybe it's not financial, but you have to find a way to look at why Techstars works, and then go replace each one where a replacement is needed. Whether it's community leaders who feel that having a creative people be a part of this program is worth time to mentor because it's a social return, you've got to find and identify different reasons why each constituent is motivated, and find a like return there. So.
Well, great. Well, Ben, that was fun. I enjoyed that.
Thank you, John.
We should just
Thank
sit
you for
down.
only asking one question about the TV show.
Oh yeah, and I noticed how you totally avoided that too. So
I went to this journalism thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's what somebody told me today in the office. There's a term for that in PR. Maybe somebody knows it. Avoidance or something like that. I don't know the PR lingo. Try to stay out of that. But spin, yeah. But anyway, Ben, thanks. I learned a lot. That was really great.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Just in
Great
case
question.
you didn't know what John is talking about, Ben, it was reported as just being, they're going to do a reality show about behind the scenes on his company on Bravo. But Ben says you can't talk about anything more than that. Don't even try to hit him up for any information. So, but thank you both for doing this. And as I said, we wanted to keep it concise, but also I didn't have any amazing expectations. I just knew we had two brilliant creative people up here who would take the block of stone that we presented to them, would start carving away at it. And we're hoping by the end of this month, this stone will actually be a beautiful sculpture of some amazing idea that we can execute upon. And I think you really helped set that in motion. I really especially like this notion of, social signals. I mean, the fact that we do use higher education, getting into a degree or getting a degree as the currency that the labor market uses to assess who you are and what you've accomplished in life, and whether that still holds value. And in my conversations with the higher ed folks at the Gates Foundation, they say the minute that goes away is the minute that higher education is dead on the vine. That currency. And so we have to be very careful about that. How many MCDM students are here or MCDM graduates? So these are people who have paid money to be in our program or are currently in the program. We take them very seriously. We hope that they're getting value while they're in our program, but we know that we're facing potentially the same challenge, and we don't want to be on the wrong side of this. So it's really important that they help lead this conversation, and thank you for starting it. And so what we'd like to do before you turn you over to the hors d'oeuvres and the drinks is just hear from one of our students who's going to tell you that, if you haven't already, of how you can actually share some of your thoughts if you hadn't had a chance to ask John or Ben a question about higher education.
Good evening. So we have this brainstorming wall over there divided in 4 to 5 different categories. We've been starting to brainstorm about the whole subject, and we're trying to work on the prototype he was talking about. So it would be really helpful, and we will really love to see if you have any ideas of questions you would like to share on any of those subjects. Would it be the tools and venue, or the participants that should be in the classroom or outside of the classroom, in the learning environment, the content and skills, funding and support, and the last one would be success and evaluation towards in the classroom but also outside, and trying to see, is a degree still relevant today? So like questions, ideas on the wall over there. Well, windows more than wall. Thank you.